The Seattle Seahawks have interviewed with a recent Super Bowl winning offensive coordinator. All right, everybody. Good morning. Hope you guys are doing well. We got some playoff football today. Starts in like 4.5 hours. Got some games. Going to be interesting to see what happens this weekend. Some stuff that may have some effect on the Seattle Seahawks offensive coordinator search. But we're going to be talking today about one particular candidate who isn't involved in these playoffs. He wasn't even involved in the NFL this year. He did not hold a position in the NFL this year or last year. We're talking about Byron Leftwich. And I don't know why he's been out of the league for 2 years, because my understanding is that he wanted to get a job in the NFL and there was just nothing really cooking there. So maybe you could look at that and say he's not thought very highly of in NFL circles. But at the same time, he actually got an interview with the New England Patriots just a couple of weeks ago for their head coaching job. So he's well respected enough to get that, I guess. So read into it how you will. But let's take a look at Byron Leftwich's career so far as a coach. Not as a player. He was a player for an extended period of time. He was an interesting player. He wasn't really ever great. He wasn't as good as people were hoping, but he was a starting caliber quarterback for a while there. He did win a Super Bowl as a backup in Pittsburgh, I believe, and he's been a name in the NFL coaching circuit for a while. He's just been out of it for the last 2 years. Now, a vast majority of Byron Leftwich's fame and notoriety as a coach in the NFL comes from his stint with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He was the offensive coordinator under Bruce Arians, and then in the final year, Todd Bowles, from 2019 to 2022. So he saw a pretty wide variety of outcomes in these seasons. And it's also going to get a little bit muddy here. I'm just going to say this right now. There was a lot of conflicting information over who was calling plays and when. It seems pretty set in stone that Leftwich was calling plays in 2022. But as for the other 3 seasons, some people say, well, it was Bruce Arians. Some people say, oh, Tom Brady was really running the show there. And then some people say it was Leftwich. And it's really hard to get a concrete answer on that one. So I'm just going to go ahead and say it. We know Leftwich has done some play calling in his coaching career. But what we don't know is exactly when and for how long. Like maybe there were some seasons where Leftwich started as the play caller, but then Arians took it away. Maybe Leftwich started as the play caller, but then Brady kind of took control and Leftwich was just there to hold a clipboard. It's hard to know. 2022 seems to be the one year where it was almost certainly Leftwich, but it's also the year where things were pretty bad. Brady was washed up at this point. He was barely a starting caliber quarterback in the league, and the Bucs offense suffered tremendously for it. They were 25th in points per game, 18.4 points per game. They only made the playoffs because they played in a terrible division, had a losing record, and then got destroyed in the playoffs as soon as they started. Negative 0.03 EPA per play, which is 20th in the league that year, so a below average EPA. So Leftwich owns this because this was after Bruce Arians departed the head coaching role and took on more of an advisory role with Tampa Bay. But at the same time, it's not really good stuff, right? He still had good stuff to play with that year. Tampa Bay, they still had, they still had, I know Brady was washed up, but they still had Brady. They still had Mike Evans. I believe they still had Chris Godwin. I believe they still had Leonard Fournette. Like, it's still an offense that most people would look at and say, there's enough talent for you to do damage, and he didn't. And what he did in 2022 has led to him being unemployed for 2 years. So there's something not so encouraging about that. Now, the previous 3 years, the points per game were great. In particular, we're focusing on these 2 years, 2021. This was the year the Buccaneers lost in the divisional round. They were second in points per game. They averaged over 30 points a game. And they were first in EPA per play, 0.143 EPA per play. So elite offense, one of the best offenses in football, maybe the best offense in football. So that's good. Who you're going to give credit to for that is your mileage may vary. 2020 was the year the Buccaneers won the Super Bowl. They averaged almost 31 points a game, which was third in the league, 0.149 EPA, fifth in the league. So bordering on elite, maybe you would call that an elite offense. Remember, 2020 was the year where offenses across the league went crazy. So those are two really good results, and Leftwich clearly had some role there, but what is that role? Some of the play calling, a little of the play calling, most of the play calling, all of it? And what's he really doing in terms of putting that offense together? Always hard to figure these things out. Now, 2019 is an interesting year because that was the year the Buccaneers had Jameis Winston at quarterback, and they were one of the highest scoring teams in the league. They averaged over 28.5 points a game, third in the league. But they actually had a flat 0 EPA, which was not even average. They literally averaged 0 EPA per play because Jameis Winston threw so many interceptions and they had so many turnovers. It just wiped out all the positivity of the points they did score. So, look, Jameis Winston's Jameis Winston. The only coach that's ever really managed to get a handle on Jameis Winston was Sean Payton. So I'm not putting that on Leftwich, but it is an interesting dichotomy here. And again, Bruce Arians was the coach in 2019. So are you going to be giving the credit to him? Are you going to be giving the blame to him? It's hard to figure this stuff out. All we have on Leftwich before his stint in Tampa was what he did in Arizona. So he's a relatively inexperienced coach. When he was a Cardinal, most recently, 2018, the Cardinals were the worst team in the league in 2018, by the way. He was the quarterback coach for the whole season, and he was the interim offensive coordinator when they fired, I think it was McCoy, midway through the season. So he was the offensive coordinator from week 8 to week 17. Now, in those weeks 18th through 17th, the Cardinals were the worst offense in the league. They averaged less than 15 points a game and worse than negative 0.2 EPA per play. However, both of those numbers were actually small improvements for the Cardinals over where they were from week 1 to week 7. So Leftwich, as the interim OC, did actually get that team slightly forward. I'm not trying to make a big deal out of it. I'm not trying to act like that's some end-all be-all of Leftwich being good, but things actually got better. They just didn't get better by enough to be anything other than 32nd in the league. And the quarterbacks that Leftwich worked with in 2018, you had Josh Rosen, one of the biggest busts in recent memory, 2,300 yards, 11 touchdowns, 14 picks, 55% completion, pretty awful. Ran for about 140 yards. And a little bit of Sam Bradford, 400 yards, 2 touchdowns, 4 picks, 62.5 rating, 62.5 completion. Not good, but can't really say he had much to work with, right? Josh Rosen, I think he's selling insurance right now. And Bradford, by this point, was pretty much getting up to the end of the line. So you're not going to get great results out of these players unless you are a Andy Reid-like genius. Now, 2017, he was just the quarterback coach. Arizona was a little bit better this year. Main quarterback was Carson Palmer in his final year before being, I think he retired after 2017. Maybe he lingered on for one more year, but I think he retired after 2017. He didn't play most of the season. He played about half of it. 2,000 yards, 9 touchdowns, 7 picks. He played okay. 84.4 QB rating. Workable. Decent. Blaine Gabbert was the backup. 1,100 yards, 6 touchdowns, 6 picks. Bleh. Whatever. Very, very middling. 72 QB rating. And Drew Stanton, about 900 yards and 6 touchdowns, 5 picks. Very similar to Gabbert, about the same breadth. Again, not good, but It's not a good collection of talent. You've got 38-year-old Carson Palmer, Blaine Gabbert, and Drew Stanton. It's hard to put together wins, and it's hard to have success when that's your crew. His first coaching job in football was an intern in 2016 for the Cardinals. Coaching intern is what the title is. Now, it's obviously he's going to be favoring the offensive side of the ball because we see where his coaching career has gone, and that's also the side of the ball he played on. So, looking at that, the Cardinals actually had a very good offense in 2016. They ended up missing the playoffs and not even having a winning record because of other things. But 7-8-1, so they were, they hung around, they hung tough. Remember, this was a Cardinals team that the Seahawks could not beat. We tied them once and we lost to them once. Cost us probably a first-round bye. And over 26 points per game, really good. So they put up points. There were other issues with that team for sure. I think that just looking at the points per game is probably kind of short-selling some of the issues they had, but I guess it's a good year. And that's it. That's all we got for Byron Leftwich. So we've got a pretty decent amount of information here. I mean, this is a guy who did win a Super Bowl as an offensive coordinator. This is a guy who oversaw 3 straight top 3 scoring offenses. This is somebody who seems to be respected and thought relatively highly of in some NFL circles, while at the same time not being respected enough to actually have a job the last 2 years. My understanding is he wanted to work in Jacksonville like 2 years ago, and Jacksonville wasn't all that into it. So it's a Rorschach painting, man. What are you going to read into it? But that's the data. Those are the facts. Let me know what you guys think. Byron Leftwich, offensive coordinator. Are you into it, or are you looking elsewhere? All right, another video coming later today. Everyone have a good day. Go Hawks.